Hey guys, it's Mike here, and I just saw Army of the Dead, Zack Snyder's newest movie that just debuted on Netflix. Now, I've definitely had a complicated history when it comes to Zack Snyder's filmography. Some of his movies, like The Watchmen, The Snyder Cut, and his Dawn of the Dead remake, of course, were movies that I really enjoyed, and I've seen a number of times. However, there are also some other movies that have been more of a mixed bag for me, like 300 and Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. However, when it comes to zombie movies, I was always a fan of them, especially when I was younger, as I've seen all of the George Romero of the Dead movies, such as Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead, which is my favorite, and I was really into the genre until eventually Hollywood got onto the craze and ran it into the ground. Though that being said, when I saw this movie was coming out on Netflix, I was kind of interested in it, if only because a lot of the goodwill that Zack Snyder built up with me after the Snyder Cut, which I really ended up liking, and you could see my review of it right here. So that being said, I finally checked out this movie after it came out, and honestly, I wish I didn't, because for me, this movie was pretty much terrible, and Zack Snyder's worst movie by far. So what exactly went wrong here, and why is this movie so bad? Well, in this video, I'm going to be discussing that, probably including some spoilers, so if you don't want to hear them, if you want to check out the movie first, then go ahead, but I definitely don't recommend doing so, because I don't think it's worth over 2 hours of your time. And there are definitely much better zombie movies you can check out, again, like Zack Snyder's remake of Dawn of the Dead, which does basically everything better than this movie ever could. So the plot of Army of the Dead is basically a heist movie in a zombie apocalypse with the setting of Las Vegas. After an event happens that causes the zombie outbreak to start and eventually overwhelms and engulfs the entirety of Las Vegas, a wealthy businessman played by Hiroyuki Sanada sends in an expert Dave Bautista, as well as a team of people who are trying to go on a heist and break into a vault underneath one of the casinos in order to retrieve $200 million. However, everything that could possibly go wrong does, usually because of bad writing, which leads to people acting incredibly stupid. In the midst of all of this, the government does what they usually do in cliched movies like this by firing a nuke at the problem and thinking it will solve it. Because in bad Hollywood movies, or just bad movies in general in America, no other bombs but nukes exist, and the government has no other way that they can stop a threat. So can the animal Bautista and his no-name companions make it out of Fallout New Vegas before the bomb hits in 24 hours? And will I and the audience really even care when they do? Well, I guess we'll get into this review. So let me first talk about the things I liked here, but don't worry, it's not going to be too long of a section. Beginning with Bautista, who honestly I've liked since his WWE days, which I used to be a big fan of that until of course that went downhill too. He was always really charismatic, and he's been shown to be able to give good performances in his movies, and is generally a likable actor, who I think often tends to make better or more informed choices with his films than even The Rock, who is kind of the actor who really led the way for him, John Cena, and a lot of these other wrestlers who are getting into Hollywood and acting now. He's pretty much the only likable character, at least somewhat, in this movie, and his backstory is better than everyone else's, giving you at least a tiny tinge of emotion before he goes into this clustermuck of a movie. You also have Theo Rossi playing in this movie, who of course played Shades in the Luke Cage Netflix series, and I thought that he gave a pretty good performance for the short amount of time that he was on screen. And the same could be said for Hiroyuki Sanada, a great Japanese actor who I enjoy seeing in movies, although he was actually probably in this movie even less than he was in Mortal Kombat when he played Scorpion, so his role was basically a glorified cameo that they probably just shot over the course of a day. There are also some decent songs that they put in the soundtrack along the way, which Zack Snyder is usually good at when it comes to his films. We only have to look at movies like Watchmen and of course the Dawn of the Dead remake to see that he knows how to really place music at points that works, despite them typically being strange choices of songs to go into there. I'm looking at you, hallelujah. But when it comes to the pros, that's pretty much it. So now let's get into the cons, which will take up the vast majority of this review. Beginning with, of course, the beginning to this movie, which was incredibly dumb, especially the cause of the zombies, which naturally in a movie like this, there tends to be some kind of outbreak that starts, say, like in a populated city or, something that escapes from government captivity creativity or a laboratory where they're creating some kind of virus, kind of like in Resident Evil. In this case, they kind of have that too, only it's far more dumb than any of them. As in this case, there was a convoy of army soldiers who were carrying a zombie from one location to the next. However, naturally, they happened to go by Las Vegas, and after a married couple just said their vows, they were driving straight toward them. And naturally, because this is a really dumb Zack Snyder movie, it began with a blowjob, as the guy driving the car was so distracted from his girl giving him head that he crashed right into the convoy, which somehow caused it to get into a massive explosion rather than just knocking the car out of the way, sending the U-Haul container flying and then eventually opening, releasing the parkour zombie inside, who proceeded to do stupid wrestling moves like Roman Reigns' Superman punch and take 1,000,000 bullets with 0 damage, despite the fact that they were shooting him constantly with machine guns, and later in the film, guns can actually do damage to him. But it's the beginning of this terrible movie, so it only makes sense for his plot armor to kick in and for him to start turning people into zombies, at which point we get another Zack Snyder opening, with a big montage that feels like they skipped over an entire movie that sees Las Vegas being taken over by zombies. And honestly, just looking at it, I probably would have rather seen that movie than this one. Although when it comes to his opening montages, this is probably one of the weakest ones he's done so far, definitely not living up to The Watchmen, for example, and really setting the tone as far as the nihilism goes here, because the entire film is steeped in it, despite the fact that they're trying to make it seem like a movie you're supposed to be having fun with, which I could tell you in my case, I certainly didn't. And that also leads into the cinematography here, because sometimes Zack Snyder's movies can look really good, but in this case, not so much. Because not only was this film not well framed at all, being shot mostly in middle shots and close-ups, but the entire movie actually looks like it was cropped, which I guess is a possibility considering what happened with the Snyder Cut, but if that is the case, then I don't understand why Netflix would have released this movie other than in its intended aspect ratio. But either way, the movie doesn't look that good and doesn't really take anywhere near as much advantage of the Las Vegas surroundings as in other movies that are very similar, or even something like Fallout New Vegas, which I'll probably do a lot more comparison later on in this video. Another thing that was really distracting was the fact that there was a number of artifacts that were in the footage in this movie, as I could see a number of pixels that were stuck on the screen right in the center of the action or over characters' faces the entire time. And I know it wasn't my TV because I checked it multiple times and it was only present during certain shots. I don't know if they shot with a camera that had some kind of issue or if they messed up when they were rendering the film, but it was really distracting the entire movie and I don't understand how Netflix approved that, because I really doubt that putting some distracting pixels in the way is a part of Zack Snyder's vision, and if it is, that's pretty cringy. As far as the characters go, I talked about liking Batista, but that's basically the only likable character in this movie, because everyone else is pretty bad, including a social media guy who tries to style on zombies and take selfies, because of course social media and YouTube is relevant now today, right fellow kids? And then we have Batista's daughter, who doesn't belong in any way or shape or form on this mission, but naturally talks her way into it, and Batista just decides to let her come, which was a really dumb choice, and you know, another theme of this movie because characters are constantly making dumb and illogical choices the entire time. Letting the daughter go, using loud guns to kill zombies instead of quiet methods like they do in The Walking Dead, such as knives, and other things so they can avoid the attention of these creatures. And naturally, in the midst of everything, the daughter decides to run away, despite it being a zombie apocalypse, so that she can try and find her friend that she shared literally one scene with, leading to a lot of forced tension and things that naturally have to happen because cliches run amok in this movie. And then of course there was a helicopter pilot who was really edgy and try-hard, constantly smoking a cigar like she was Arnold Schwarzenegger or something. And from what I've heard, the original actor cast here and they actually shot the movie with was comedian Chris D'Elia, who they replaced with Tig Notaro, who honestly I think did a terrible job. Although that goes for just about everyone else in this movie aside from Batista and the ones I mentioned. And really this entire movie is just filled to the brim with nonsensical writing and stuff that makes zero sense, and it's honestly baffling to me how they approved this script. Now it's not like Zack Snyder has ever been that great of a writer to begin with. He's better when it comes to his directing and his visual style than he is when it comes to his creativity and his screenwriting, but for whatever reason he was the primary screenwriter here and it definitely shows. Because not only is there a lot of really just dumb moments and things that just make you roll your eyes, but there's also a number of plot holes, including one involving the entire plot of the film. And the fact that they present it as being this bank heist movie and send these characters on this heist to get money, but then they're just like, none of this really matters. We just want the head head of this one zombie, which if they probably sent them in trying purposely to get this one head, would have gone significantly better than them and wouldn't have wasted all their time and actually allowed them to complete their mission. It's like Zack Snyder just wrote this thing in a weekend and turned in the first draft, and then people just let him do it with very minimal improvements. And I do see on the IMDb that there are other people that might have helped to work on the screenplay, but I can only imagine just how bad it originally was if this is the best that they could do to improve it. I mean, just look at the dialogue, for instance. There are so many bad lines and cringy moments of dialogue, with the dumbest one being from Hiroyuki Sanada, who tells people, oh, this mission will be easy squeezy Japanesey. And then they get into a discussion about, oh, you can't say that anymore, but then he's like, well, I actually am Japanese. Who thought this was funny? Who put this in the movie? And there are so many lines like that that just make you roll your eyes throughout. And despite this being a zombie movie where zombies tend to be a very important aspect here, honestly, I think the zombies are one of the worst aspects, because their own internal mechanics make little sense and they do a lot of really dumb things like throw people around instead of just immediately eating them. And they do like a lot of crazy parkour moves and other things that really don't make any sense when it comes to a mindless zombie creature that's just trying to crave hunger. The zombies here were nowhere near as good as the more traditional and mindless kind of zombies, such as from Dawn of the Dead, which Zack Snyder did a much better job there than he did here with the zombies. This one seemed to be going for something more like I Am Legend, where the zombies are more like next evolution of the human form, and there are a number of zombies like the leader and the queen who are presented as being alpha zombies, and I guess they're more intelligent despite the fact that they still scream and constantly and act just about as dumb as the main characters do. And ultimately, compared to Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, or even a movie like I Am Legend or something like this one just doesn't hold up. It's overly long, which is saying something for a Zack Snyder movie because it was only a little bit over 2 hours and it felt like about 5. It was also unenjoyable, not even fun in the least, being far too boring and dragged out at points for me to really even have fun during this film. And it was also overly nihilistic, constantly painting a negative story about pretty much everyone and everything involving this, and not giving you any kind of happy or positive resolution. Every time that there's a chance to do so, Zack Snyder goes in the opposite direction, so if you weren't having fun before, you're definitely not going to be as the movie goes along. Because every moment of levity has to turn out to be extremely dark with a character we might have just had a tinge of enjoyment for just being killed off nonchalantly, naturally after being thrown around a bunch instead of just immediately eaten. So compared to Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead remake, I'd take that movie a million times over this one. And honestly, this movie is so dumb and so poorly made that it feels like a movie that they would watch in the world of Mike Judge's Idiocracy, alongside other terrible programming like Punch in the Groin and whatever else they watch in that movie. And you definitely could have done a really interesting post-apocalyptic and even zombie-filled story that takes place in Las Vegas, while taking better advantage of the location and the atmosphere of Sin City. I mean, all you have to do is take a look at Fallout New Vegas, one of my favorite games of all time, where they handled so many of the same elements and themes a million times better than Zack Snyder does here. That's a movie or a live-action adaptation I would actually really like to see, whereas with this one, I don't ever want to see it again. So overall, Army of the Dead is a terrible movie, and by far Zack Snyder's worst film that pretty much destroyed almost all of the goodwill that he had built up with the Snyder Cut. It's boring, unenjoyable, frustrating, and absolutely not worth your time to watch. I would rather watch all the Lex Luthor scenes from Batman v Superman 5 times back to back than ever watch this trash again. It's just that awful. And if I didn't have to review it and didn't have to tell you guys just not to watch it at all, I probably wouldn't have even finished it. But it seems like the reaction to this movie so far is kind of mixed, so let me know your own thoughts down below. Do you agree or completely disagree? Let me know in the comments. Make sure to subscribe and enable all notifications so you can stay up to date with all of my videos. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stick around because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.